haven't posted in like 3 months. Girls love my swag. Hello, welcome back to my realm, or orbit as I like to say. I am Tongyan, aka a girl of habit, as you might can tell. And today, another video essay accompanied by some date honey tea in my cute panda cup. Perfume has piqued my interest about a year ago, and not necessarily the act of buying perfume and collecting perfume, also because I'm quite picky with perfume, but rather the idea that perfume can hold. And so today I present you perfume as a reflection or a contradiction, the history, the identity that it can hold, nostalgia, and semantics.
Welcome, class! In this lesson, we will discuss the history about perfume.
For the history of perfume, we're gonna rapid fire this, because the history of perfume, I'm pretty sure you can make like a whole separate video for that. So I'm just going to give you the most important parts, I would say. Did you know that perfume is over 5,000 years old? Yeah. Through human history, scent was not only used for beauty, but also for memory, power, worship, intimacy, and ritual. The word perfume originates from the Latin word perfumum, meaning through smoke. And the earliest perfumes were incense burned in religious rituals in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. And Egyptians would use scents to honor their gods and embalm the dead. They used aromatic oils in rituals, believing that fragrance could protect their soul in afterlife. And basically, as civilizations expanded and spread, fragrance also shifted from a sacred ritual into a personal indulgence, especially because of the Romans and the Greeks. It also served as a marker of your status and your power at the time. The ancient wealthy elite bathed themselves in scented oils, perfuming their homes, their hair, like everything. But it was in the 9th century, a scientific breakthrough from the Parisian polymath named Avicenna, also known as Sina. And he basically perfected the process of steam distillation from extracting oils from flowers, more specifically from roses. Because before his innovation, you see, creating perfume was such a labor-intensive act. They had to use the process of maceration, i.e. steeping flowers into resins or crushed herbs into heavy pots of hot liquid animal fat or thick olive oils. And the innovation basically allowed for a more scientific approach for making perfume. And over the centuries, this distillation knowledge traveled along the trade routes into Europe, where eventually a massive agriculture trade blossomed. Basically, by the time Europe fully embraced the craft of perfume making, there was a southern town of Grasse in France, famously also the setting for the book Perfume by Suskind, which I will be talking about later. It was a fragrance capital of the world. The vast fields of jasmine, of rose, of tuberose existed only for one purpose. Can you guess the purpose? To harvest, to make into a perfume. Yet long before fragrance became a very commercialized market like it is today, it operated without a true retail blueprint and existed primarily as a localized craft. It was Pierre-François Pascal Guerlain who altered this landscape in 1828 by launching his pioneering storefront at 42 Rue de Rivoli in Paris. He effectively anchored, in a sort of type of way, the unorganized trade into a more structural luxury industry. And this perfume store was quite well known. And then, nearly a century later, the industry shifted again on its axis because Coco Chanel released Coco Chanel No. 5 in 1921. You may ask, what's so special about this perfume? Well, I will tell you. Coco Chanel No. 5 was built on synthetic molecules called aldehydes. It allowed perfumers to compose complex scents that existed nowhere in nature. And that brings us to the current state of perfume. And now, roughly 80% of the modern fragrance formulations are composed of lab synthesized molecules. But this shift didn't just change how perfume was made, it changed our entire relationship around it. Because fragrance became so accessible and diverse, it became easier to change your identity with it. And whenever I think of the subject perfume, my mind immediately goes to how perfume is and can be a sort of instant character change. Even though, you can cut your hair and change your style, perfume seems to be something that carries something deeper. And when exploring identity and perfume, Keller and Miller write in the chapter A More Honest Self in the book. This book, published by Viscose journal named Scent, they write how our physical representation becomes an object to which we and other people can attribute aesthetic choices and identity to, but realizing that purely a visual self can lack a depth to fully represent our complexity. And there is where perfume comes to play. At their core, clothes exist so you may not be naked. You must wear pants, but you don't have to wear perfume. Clothes form an aesthetic barrier between the self and the world. Perfume, as an expression of scent placed within the framework of style, is not a barrier around our identity, but rather an extension of it towards others. It's an invitation to perceive something about us that is not easily rendered visible. And I mean, life is a playground. It's your playground. You get to decide whether you play on it and how you play on it. Perfume has quite a playful nature to it if you think about it, because it can create a dichotomy within the self and how other people perceive you. Again, like the quote that Keller and Miller said, the way you present yourself with your clothes sometimes cannot easily render your full complexities of your human existence. You can create a dichotomy with the self. What I mean with this is you can present yourself very feminine presenting and wear a more musky scent, or you can look more masculine and wear a more floral scent. Perfume doesn't have to match the visual. It can contradict, it can deepen, it can complicate, and isn't that so powerful, knowing that you can change that anytime, any day, any hour, whenever you want? That's quite liberating if you think about that, if you ask me. And what makes this even more interesting is how the idea and the stereotype of, oh, florals are more for women and musky scents are more for men, was actually not really a real thing. Kings and warriors actually wore like jasmine and rose scented perfume. There was no gender tied towards fragrance, because gendered fragrance was essentially something that came in the 19th century as a marketing strategy to make more sales. And also the gender roles were becoming more rigid at the time, so they packaged women perfume in pink and then men perfume in darker bottles. And by the 80s, department stores were basically fully separated of men and women perfume. And in Victorian Europe, fragrance also came with a strict moral code, which I find interesting, because respectable women wore light, delicate flowers, the kind of scent that basically tried to say that, oh, I am not trying too hard, but anything heavier, anything more bold, anything that was more announcing your presence in a room was sort of a dangerous territory, because wearing too much fragrance was something too sensual or too complex, which was also directly then associated with prostitutes, which I was like, what? Finding that out when I was searching about that was crazy. Anyway, I also say how perfume is something so deeply personal, because it can be one of the most unique things about you. I say how the most unique things about you are your brain and the way you smell, because you're able to buy a perfume and it's everywhere in a department store, but once you put it on your skin, it will not smell the same on your friend, on your sister, because of your natural pH levels, your hormones, your natural oils. They completely basically change the chemistry of the scent. For example, I remember once I had this perfume and I didn't like the scent of it, and then I asked my little sister, like, oh, do you want this perfume? I don't really use it that much. And then when she sprayed it on her skin, it smelled so completely different. I was like, this is crazy. It is the next day of me filming this video, that's why it explains the sudden outfit change. But when I think about the intersection of perfume and identity, immediately what comes to mind is a signature scent. I feel like a signature scent can hold so much beauty and tenderness, because a lot of people in this world do carry a signature scent with them, but also a lot of people in this world try to find that signature scent that will capture their identity and their being. A signature scent is quite a daunting task. It is something that you invite in your life that is not necessarily needed. It's not just like clothes that you wear, like I said previously, but it's something that you want to choose to add more depth to you as a human being. And when we talk about signature scents, there is one piece of literature that takes identity and perfume to its absolute. Perfume by Suskind. Actually, one of my favorite books that I have read, and it follows this main character called Jean-Baptiste Grenouille. Also, by the way, I will be kind of spoiling this for people who have been wanting to read this book. But it follows this main character named Jean-Baptiste Grenouille, and I promise you that name will be imprinted in your hippocampus, because this man, he's a freak. He is a freak. And also, I never had this, but when I would read this book outside, random strangers would come up to me telling me, oh my god, that is my favorite book of all time. The book is set in the 18th century of France, more specifically in the southern town of Grasse, which we have previously been talking about. And it follows the main character. He himself has this extraordinary sense of smell. He can isolate and distinguish thousands of individual scents simultaneously, but one thing haunts him with devastation, and is a problem that he faces, is that he himself, even though he can smell so many thousands of different scents, he himself is odorless and he cannot smell himself. And because of this, a lot of people also find him uncanny because he has no scent. Because of this lack, spends his entire life to create the perfect human scent. A fragrance that would be so powerful that anyone who would smell the scent would completely, instantly, and unconditionally love him. And because of his obsession to capture this identity, he then becomes a serial killer. He tries to find 25 women he kills. But what I find interesting about this character is he is not killing these people because he hates women. He kills these people just for their scent, just to take their signature scent. Eventually, when this perfume is made and he is captivated because of his murders, obviously, he then stands there when they're going to him. And then he sprays this perfume on that he created, and suddenly everyone adores him. Everyone loves him so much that the ending, it's overwhelming. And the ending is something that will stay with you. Because after achieving everything and creating the most powerful scent in the world, Grenouille feels nothing. He realizes that the world doesn't love him, but they just loved the mask that he engineered. Also, to note, there is a movie adaptation of this book. And even though the book is still better than the movie adaptation was quite a good adaptation of the book. So I do recommend that film if you want to watch that.
Wow, that's odd.
what I find beautiful, and ultimately, I think, what makes perfume so special, that perfume is something that demands and requires a physical presence. To know exactly how a perfume feels like, you have to surrender in it. Perfume is already one of the most abstract things that exists. You cannot photograph it, you cannot replay it, you cannot hang it on a wall, and it exists only in the moment of experiencing it. And then it's gone, which ultimately also makes perfume a luxury too. If you compare it to clothes you can see in a photo, you can get a sense of how it looks like, but to even have the slightest grasp on how a scent smells, you have to be present with it. Call that #analogfinalboss. Perfumers know this, and that's why they make limited quantities of certain perfumes, because they create then a scarcity. Perfume extends in spaces we enter. Even when you leave a room, the scent can still linger on longer, even after you have left. And in the same book, this art book, Keller and Miller say, our scents reach beyond our own bodies, but so do the scents of everybody around us. People can use their scented bodies to scent the rooms they move through, and in turn, the scent of these rooms is imprinted on everybody. Conforming to or subverting an aesthetic which sense is not just a symbolic action, it is a physical process. The sun decided to kiss my skin. How beautiful. Anyway, the art book also describes this one art installation first exhibited in 2008 called Perfect Japanese Woman Eau de Parfum by Maki Ueda. And the concept of this artwork presented 4 fragrances. Just like any perfume shop, you were free to spray these perfumes onto paper strips and smell them. But what was interesting was that each of these perfumes symbolized how Japanese society expected women to be like. Ueda also extracted every single perfume herself from the natural raw materials. The first scent was called Nuka Miso, also the scent of motherhood. There is this derogatory expression for a housewife, a woman that stinks like Nuka Miso. It basically describes a woman so consumed by domestic labor that she is stopped being seen as an attractive individual. And Nuka Miso is a fermented rice bran paste used for pickling, but it's quite messy and very labor intensive, and it also requires like daily hand stirring, and that daily hand stirring then causes a sour smell to linger on your hands. This sour scent on a woman's hands became then a sort of symbol for a quiet sacrifice. Ueda then tried to bottle this exact sour smell. And then, with a dark humor, she wrote in the description, spray this on your hands before serving your husband, so he thinks you made the meal yourself. And the second scent of the art installation was called tatami. Tatami is a traditional Japanese carpet woven with rush grass, and Ueda writes, a new tatami mat is always preferred because it's clean and it gives this fresh smell of rush grass, but over time the smell fades and dies. And there is also this deeply patriarchal Japanese proverb that says, wives and tatami mats are better when they're new. The proverb implies basically that a wife's value is the same as a tatami mat. Ueda extracted this exact fresh grassy scent of a brand new tatami mat and marketing it sarcastically as a perfume to feel younger. And the third scent of the art installation was called miso soup, also the scent of a woman in a kitchen. Ueda writes, a happy morning is to wake up with the sound of the kitchen and the smell of miso soup. That's the traditional image of a family. If you want to wake up your family with such elegance, this perfume can help you. This miso soup perfume can be used as a room spray. The family will wake up with the happiness resulting from the smell of miso soup. This perfume is also useful for fooling the nose of your husband in case you want to pretend that you have been working all day in the kitchen. And then the fourth scent, aka the last scent of the art exhibition, was called soap. It was also named after the scent of pureness and cleanliness, as it was designed to basically smell like shampoo and soap, as it's apparently favored in Japanese culture. Ueda also writes that there is this one phenomenon where high school girls would just wash their hair just so it would smell like shampoo. And Ueda also writes that there is this high favoring towards soapy perfume by Japanese men on women. When I read this, I found it so interesting because I remember I read somewhere how Lazy Sunday Morning from Martin Margiela Replica, his perfume line, is one of the most top selling perfumes in Japan. And guess what? That perfume literally, because I have the perfume at home too, that perfume literally smells like soap and like fresh sheets. I was like, that's interesting. And when we talk about perfume, there is almost no denying that the parallels it has with the fashion industry, because many luxury labels, they use perfume to link it with their runway collections to either reinforce brand storytelling or even see it as an opportunity for the normal, like regular customer to make them feel like how it would feel like to buy luxury within the brand. And in 1992, the designer Thierry Mugler, known for his extravagant shows, for example, Fall Winter 1995 or Spring Summer 1997, he came out with the scent named Angel. Perfume at the time was mostly just clean florals and light musk, which why this perfume was so groundbreaking at the time, because it was considered one of the first gourmand scent out there, which is so crazy to think about because the notes of this perfume was like caramel, vanilla, patchouli, and like I feel like these notes and dessert like fragrances are so common these days. If you go to a perfume shop, how many dessert like perfumes will you see and encounter? How many vanilla scents will you encounter? Well, many. Interesting, because this perfume at the time was seen as avant-garde. Literally, the perfumers who made this perfume said that it would never sell. Department stores even declined it and rejected the perfume because it was too avant-garde. But ultimately, you know, that was the point. I mean, we're talking about Mugler here. And for Mugler, the perfume was a continuation of the world that he creates with his clothes. If you couldn't afford his clothes, which most average consumers couldn't, you could still enter his world through the perfume that he created. And it's interesting because this perfume became so successful, it essentially funded his fashion house for years. A scented body doesn't necessitate understanding from those who don't have your relation to a specific scent. Through their own lived experience, a scent will mean or will come to mean something entirely different. We create new typographies that can only be formed through the relations we experience. And what I also found so interesting about perfume is how it can also intersect with nostalgia. I'm pretty sure that anyone who is watching this video has had this, where you smell a specific perfume or you smell a specific scent even, and it immediately just transports you back to like a specific area of your life or even like someone you know. And there is actually a reason why scent and memory are so deeply connected, which I found so interesting when I was researching for this video. Because unlike other senses like touch, taste, sight, when you smell something, the scent molecules travel through your nose and directly connect it with the amygdala and the hippocampus. It's basically the two parts of your brain that are responsible for memory and emotion, and no other senses work like this. Only the sense of smell, because every other sense still has to process through the thalamus in the brain. And there is a psychological phenomenon for nostalgia and how it relates to scent. It's called the Proust effect. It was basically by this dude called Marcel Proust. It was a French writer in his novel Search of Lost Time, and it described a moment where he dipped this Madeleine cake in tea, and because of the scent and the taste, suddenly involuntarily flooded him with this overwhelming rush of childhood memories, so vivid that it almost felt like he was actually there again, not just remembering, but almost like sort of reliving. And that experience became so famous that in literature and science, the researchers started to use his name for it. And now, the Proust effect refers specifically to the phenomenon where a scent triggers like a vivid, involuntarily charged memory, usually from early childhood. And also, what I found intriguing when I was reading about perfume for this video is that when you smell something for the first time that your brain has never encountered before, whatever emotion or whatever moment you're in at that time becomes then permanently linked to that scent. And this is also the reason why certain people cannot wear certain fragrances anymore after they broke up with someone. What I also find beautiful is how scent specifically can be a collective memory. For example, if I say the smell of fresh grass or the smell of sunscreen or petrichor, these are tied to trigger nostalgia across cultures because they're tied to shared human experience. There's a lack of language when we talk about perfume. Karagiorgos writes in the chapter Putting Scent in Words in the same book that I keep referencing, although smell is our oldest sense, the one we process with the least intellectual effort, we have not sufficiently developed ways of verbally communicating to each other how scents and smells trigger our mind and psyche, how it produces social meaning. Language is the least efficient tool for describing what a scent smells like. In most languages, there are no or very few words for describing olfactory terms. Instead, we borrow adjectives and nouns that trigger our taste memories like sweet, bitter, acidic, or we aim directly at referencing specific components of a smell that are easily recognizable, like flowers. Usually, language relies on parallelism with taste or a direct semiotic references to detectable ingredients. But how efficient is this? Hundreds of smells would contain the smell of rose, while having very little in common, and to complicate it, numerous synthetic molecules have been developed in the hands of a skilled perfumer. A rose can be fresh, dusty, succulent, sweet, overpowering, or metallic. Talking about scents is an arbitrary accumulation of similes and metaphors. There is no room for literalness. And if you look into how perfume is presented to you, usually fragrances are sold through relying on narratives or places or identities, even moods, rather than just language itself. But, maybe the gap is not something that needs to be solved. I feel like the moment scent becomes fixed in language, it would literally lose the very thing that makes it so powerful and special. Its ability to shift, to contradict, to mean something entirely different from one person to the next. Perfume almost doesn't ask to be understood in a literal sense, but to be experienced, remembered, and felt. It exists in memory before language can reach it. It stays in places after we have left. It is recognized by others in ways we can't fully perceive ourselves. And maybe that's why it can carry identity, hold memory, and exist as art all at once. Well, that was the end of my perfume rant, I guess. Let me know what you think and what your thoughts are. It feels weird that this video will be over because I've been working on it for quite a long bit. I will see you in the future. Bye!